We remain united. We remain united.
Watching President Biden's speech on his ban of Russian gas, the import of Russian fossil fuels, I noticed he kept repeating a certain phrase over and over and over again. So let's kind of dig in here. Let's just listen into what he's got to say.
We remain united. We remain united in our purpose to keep pressure mounting on Putin and his war machine. Putin's war machine. Putin's war. Putin's aggression to Putin and his war machine. Inflict further pain on Putin. Of Putin's war. Putin's war. Since Putin began his military buildup in Ukrainian borders, Putin's price hike, Putin's war against the people of Ukraine. Tyrants like Putin won't. Putin's war. Putin's war. But Putin seems determined to continue on his murderous path. Putin's now targeting cities. Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city. Putin's assault on global peace and stability today, that they are not about to just let Putin take what he wants. Putin's war on Ukraine will, but Putin seems determined to continue on his murderous path, no matter the cost. Russia's aggression is Russia's vicious war of choice. Putin's now targeting cities and has been targeting cities.
It's almost as if they're trying to blame everything on Vladimir Putin and trying to paint him as a one-dimensional madman bent on world domination, willing to risk anything and everything to achieve his very personal goals of being emperor of, his fiefdom. Let's continue.
Civilian schools, hospitals, apartment buildings. Last week, he attacked the largest nuclear power plant in Europe with an apparent disregard for the potential of triggering a nuclear meltdown. He has already turned 2 million Ukrainians into refugees. Russia may continue to grind out its advance at a horrible price, but this much is already clear. Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city, but he'll never be able to hold the country. And if we do not respond to Putin's assault on global peace and stability today, the cost of freedom and to the American people will be even greater tomorrow. I know there's a lot of...
This makes me laugh.
I know there's a lot of questions, but there's a lot more that has to be made clear, and I'm going to hold on that till we get more information. Thank you. Appreciate it.
So he seems to be repeating Putin, Putin's war, Putin's aggression. Everything is attributed to Putin. And that had me thinking. So let's read here. People tend to perceive claims as truer if they had been exposed to them before. This is known as the illusory truth effect, and it helps explain why advertisements and propaganda work, and also why people believe fake news to be true. So it's repetition frequency, the illusory truth effect, right? And this is a quote usually infamously attributed to top Nazi propagandist Joseph Goebbels. But let's read it. If you tell a lie big enough and keep repeating it, people will eventually come to believe it. The lie can be maintained only for such time as the state can shield the people from the political, economic, and military consequences of the lie. It thus becomes vitally important for the state to use all of its powers to repress dissent, for the truth is the mortal enemy of the lie, and thus, by extension, the truth is the greatest enemy of the state. So, if you're wondering why they're censoring all types of Russian media, why they're censoring all types of people with pro-Russian sympathies or Russian disinformation, and this goes way beyond the Ukraine conflict. This has been going back and back, but if you're fighting a war of morality, you don't need to suppress anyone, because the truth would only go to show how good of people you are. But going back to the repeating of lies, right? We keep repeating that Putin, it's all his fault, and Putin is this evil, evil villain. But meanwhile, we've known for decades, upon decades, that expansion of NATO is a serious security concern for Russia and its existence, let alone having a sphere of influence. And an extreme red line for NATO expansion would be something like Ukraine, which is right upon Russia's border, as well as significant and historical weak spot where they have been invaded multiple times by foreign powers, including Germany and Nazis. But this is Joe Biden himself back in 1997. This video has been circulating a little bit. There's a lot of gold in it. This is Joe Biden. This is former head of the CIA. And this is an Atlantic Council meeting. And they're talking about NATO expansion back in 1997. And Joe Biden's going to talk about how even back then he knew expansion into the Baltic states and into Ukraine would be inflammatory towards Russia.
What about the Baltics and what are their prospects? Their prospects are real but more distant. And I think this is me and only me speaking, not speaking for the administration or anyone else in the United States Congress. And I obviously, to state the obvious, I could be dead wrong about this. I think the one place where the greatest consternation would be caused in the short term for admission, having nothing to do with the merit and preparedness of the country to come in, would be to admit the Baltic states now in terms of NATO-Russian, U.S.-Russian relations. And if there was ever anything that was going to tip the balance, were it to be tipped in terms of a vigorous and hostile reaction, I don't mean military, in Russia, it would be that.
So we have NATO expansion, and we have Joe Biden and a whole list of people, United States diplomats, politicians, people with power, talking about how they knew that this would be a vast escalation with Russia to be expanding NATO, especially in places like Ukraine or in the Baltic states, which border directly onto Russia. So we have the expansion of NATO. We have economic warfare with the Nord Stream pipeline. And we also have the United States and the Maidan coup overthrowing the Ukrainian government in 2014 and installing their puppet regime, which Joe Biden himself was, the imperial czar of Ukraine. He was its imperial governor during the Obama administration when he was vice president. That's how his son Hunter got that job with Burisma, and that's where all that corruption comes from. It stems from Joe Biden, quote unquote, taking point on Ukraine, which is Washington speak for, being in charge of it. So now taking into context that Joe Biden himself has helped to wage a military, economic, and diplomatic war on Russia for decades, has been using Ukraine as a pawn for years on end, has used Ukraine as a place to personally enrich himself and his family. Let's listen to his speech again where, I'm not saying Putin should be invading Ukraine, that it's legal, that I agree with it. I'm anti-war. I think Putin's invasion of Ukraine is illegal, but it's also very illogical. And anyone could have predicted it coming. If you put a dangerous wounded animal into a corner and start prodding it with a stick, eventually it's going to lash out at you. That's just obvious. So taking all that into consideration, let's hear Joe Biden once again try to paper over reality, paper over all of the Western imperialism, chauvinism, NATO expansion, economic warfare of sanctions, sabotaging pipelines, Nord Stream 2. We have, diplomatic warfare of, cooing governments that are making economic deals with Russia. Let's take that all into account. Let's listen to Joe Biden again.
We remain united. We remain united in our...
Sorry, that makes me laugh when he says, united, united. It's very funny to me. I don't know why.
We remain united. We remain united in our purpose to keep pressure mounting on Putin and his war machine. Putin's war machine. Putin's war. Putin's aggression and Putin and his war machine. Inflict further pain on Putin. Putin's war. Putin's war, since Putin began his military buildup on Ukrainian borders, Putin's price hike, Putin's war against the people of Ukraine. Tyrants like Putin won't. Putin's war. Putin's war. But Putin seems determined to continue on his murderous path. Putin's now targeting cities. Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city. Putin's assault on global peace and stability today, that they are not about to just let Putin take what he wants. Putin's war on Ukraine will, but Putin seems determined to continue on his murderous path, no matter the cost. Russia's aggression is Russia's vicious war of choice. Putin's now targeting.
I'm going to coin this term now. What you just saw is now known as Putin projection, where the West, and this is not a defense of Vladimir Putin, nor to say he is a person to be admired, because I don't think he is. But Putin projection is now an exercise in which diplomats, politicians, and officials of the West will project all the worst qualities of themselves and their governments and organizations upon Vladimir Putin and paint him as a one-dimensional boogeyman to paper over any fault they have in any current situation. So, you know, this is your example of it right here.
In cities, and has been targeting cities and civilians, schools, hospitals, apartment buildings. Last week, he attacked the largest nuclear power plant in Europe with an apparent.
So he's saying he's bombing schools, civilians, apartment buildings, hospitals. This is war, so I'm not going to deny Vladimir Putin has targeted civilians. I don't know if that's happened, but I won't deny that that's happened. But I do know for a fact that more than one story that has been broken in the Western media about these civilian attacks has been debunked and proven to be, you know, not the case. So one of the most famous stories is the supposed story of a Russian cruise missile hitting an apartment building. And the reality was it was a Ukrainian surface-to-air anti-air missile that went rogue and crashed into an apartment building. So they accidentally killed their own people. Accidentally. Who knows if it was really even an accident? Maybe that's an attempt at a false flag there. Either way, it was blamed on Russians, and look at them targeting civilians. And meanwhile, it was the Ukrainian people having an accident. That's also just, you know, that's evidence that Putin is a madman bent on, you know, destabilizing the world. Then why can't you put that own evidence against your own record? You have the Iraq War, the Afghanistan War, naked wars of aggression on your own record. Not to mention your own culpability in this war and escalating it to this point. You know, you've been working decades to get us to this point, Joe Biden.
Disregard for the potential of triggering a nuclear meltdown.
Also, this whole nuclear power plant thing, I have to do further research on it, but from what I've seen, the Russians overtook control of it from the Ukrainians, you know, peacefully, because it's a nuclear power plant. So the Ukrainians there peacefully surrendered it to the Russians. And then at some point later, far-right nationalist forces aligned with the Ukrainian government were attacking a facility adjacent to the nuclear power plant. So a firefight and a fire broke out at a facility next door to the nuclear power plant, not at the nuclear power plant itself. So that is portrayed by Joe Biden as Vladimir Putin risking a nuclear explosion because he's a madman bent on world domination, willing to risk shelling a nuclear power plant. That's the way he's portraying it.
He has already turned 2 million Ukrainians into refugees. Russia may continue to grind out its advance at a horrible.
How many refugees has the United States made over the past 20 years with its, you know, drone program, 2 major wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the 5 or 6 other major conflicts where we're bombing the shit out of people, Somalia, Pakistan, Libya, Yemen. The list goes on and on. The list goes on and on.
Right. But this much is already clear. Ukraine will never be a victory for Putin. Putin may be able to take a city, but he'll never be able to hold the country. And if we do not respond to Putin's assault on global peace and stability today, the cost of freedom and to the American people will be even greater tomorrow.
So we have to pump Ukraine full of arms. We have to saber rattle with Russia nuclear power. We have to use Ukrainians as cannon fodder as well as a piggy bank to enrich our oligarchs. And that's it, for a few people to make profits. That's Joe Biden's big, bright idea. And just for laughs again, after saying all this stunning shit, you know, this is a 12-minute long speech, and he goes into a few different things and basically gives, you know, a bunch of escalatory comments and, you know, and then says this.
I know there's a lot of... I know there's a lot of questions.
Man is marching us closer to World War III and blames everything on Putin, and then does this.
But there's a lot more that has to be made clear, and I'm going to hold on that till we get more information. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Imagine Trump was doing some shit like that. Imagine Trump, you know, imagine the thing with Kim Jong-un got, you know, this hot and this serious. Then Trump, you know, waged a further economic war, you know, pumped South Korea full even more. I don't know. Continued the analogy. And then he just ends the press conference with, yeah, I'm sure you guys have questions, but, you know, we got to figure out some more answers first. And then just leaves. Just leaves. No, that's kind of funny. I do miss the comedy of a Trump press conference. It would have at least added some levity to this situation. Some of the funny, ridiculous, stupid, harebrained shit he would have said when pressed by the media in a situation like this. Either way, I mean, they would have asked him any real questions. They would have just, even if he was 1 second away from a nuclear war with Putin, they would have asked him why he was Putin's puppet. So it wouldn't have been constructive. It just would have been funny. Either way, there's a reason why in the media narrative is Putin is a madman. He's one-dimensional. This is all Putin's fault. This is all Putin's war. It helps the jingoistic drumbeat of war keep to drum along, boom, ba-doom, ba-doom, ba-doom. But it also papers over all of the faults and crimes of the West. That's what it is.